Hey Bernadette, how you doing, sweetie? Sending you so much love. Okay, we're gonna come up in 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom. We are at 10. Ooh, 5. Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you. I thank God that we've been able to get through another year. A lot of people didn't make it through 2025. Don't count my chickens before they hatch, but I am so grateful for the time that I've been given. And I'm grateful for the time that and space that I've been able to share with all of you. May God bless you all. As a Christian, this is my holy season, and I am so grateful to be able to share it with you. I'm also appreciative of the Hanukkah celebration that our Jewish brothers and sisters are embracing at this time, this festival of lights, and the day after Christmas, the Kwanzaa celebration. Cultural celebrations, both of them, but very important to these different communities. Kwanzaa pulls the African diaspora together to celebrate 7 principles that encourage really cooperation and understanding that all of us are important and that all of us are necessary in the spiritual human project. So God bless you all in this season. And let's think about this year that was. Whew. And the year that is ahead. We've been looking at 2026 as the midterm year, but you know what? We had thousands of elections below the federal line that have completely changed the complexion of American politics. And I don't mean in just some phenotypic way, just skin color. I mean philosophically. The largest city in the United States is now going to have a Democratic Socialist as the mayor. People did not pay attention to his political affiliation. They wanted to know his philosophy.
Mhm.
They don't care about the labels. Young, old, rich, poor, people want to know, what are you going to do for the people? And you're seeing that happen all over the place. It almost happened in Minneapolis, St. Paul with State Senator Omar Fateh. It almost happened. He did win the caucus. So there's a lot that's going on. You see that even though in Texas you've had this gerrymandering, this attempt to push the Democrats out, now many Latinos are moving over. So we might not lose those seats. And now Jasmine Crockett is running for the U.S. Senate. Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes is running for the House of Representatives. You just, you can't make this stuff up. We just don't know where things are going to go politically. Socially, we don't know where things are going to go. We're looking at Gaza still. But guess what? Now we have what President Lula da Silva of Brazil says could be our own Vietnam. We are
Mhm.
killing people, fishermen on these boats. I just had uh, the lawyer for Alejandro Carranza on my show a couple of days ago, Dan
Mhm.
Kovalek, and I thank him for his work. He's actually bringing our government up on charges of murder.
Mm.
What is going to happen, everybody? So we've got Mamdani, we've got New Jersey, we've got Virginia, we've got the midterms that are coming up, we've got health care. These premiums are going to explode. What is going to happen with people? Oh, Terry O'Neill, your son-in-law and daughter are not alone. There are people who are paying 1,400, 1,500 a month, and they've got $15,000 uh, deductibles.
That's
Who can
right.
afford that? What is
Sorry.
going to happen? I mean, when you first get that bill, when people are going to have to move off of healthcare, are we going to begin to have a real conversation and have a real movement, not toward, but to fully embrace Medicare for all?
Mhm.
Think about that. So we've got a lot going on. I don't know what the big issue for you has been in 2025, but I want you to let me know what has been the story or these stories that really captured your imagination. Hey, John Solomon, excuse me, Holloman, sending you so much love. I couldn't see you over my bangs. And Bernadette sending you so much love. Hey, everybody, like and share, like and share, like and share. And I want to know what your thoughts are about 2026, not just the midterms. What is that going to mean? I don't think people are really moving toward parties. I think they're moving toward philosophy. They want to know what you're going to deliver. So Democrats, do they have an edge? Perhaps. But when you have Thomas Massey, who's making sense on Epstein, people are making sense on dual citizenship. Should people fully disclose who they are when they go into elective office? Think about that. When you have Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's about to leave the U.S. House of Representatives, but we don't know where she's going to go. But she did say, my own children cannot afford this health care. What are you all going to do? She's speaking for a whole lot of people. She's not being run out of office. She's electing to go. So I want to know, John Holloman, Bernadette, everybody who's watching, let us know what the stories are for you. What are the issues? What are they? And what do you think is going to happen in 2026? We don't know. It's such a crazy time, but we need to find out what is happening, everybody. 2025, the year that was, 2026, the year that will be. What's going to be the issue? Healthcare, war and peace. What do you think? We've got Jane Ruby, the head of the League of Women Voters of Chicago, Dr. Alia Amar, brilliant social justice advocate, and Attorney Terry O'Neill, President Emeritus of the National Organization of Women. So you know what, Attorney Terry O'Neill, let's start with you. It's hard to choose a story, but if you want to pick some, go for it.
Oh, I really think the New York mayor's election is a really huge story for 2025, and here's why. You can say affordability this, affordability that, and if you don't understand what it means, it's not going to win you any elections. I think that Zohran Mamdani talked about affordability in a way that made clear that he understands the problem. Right. He's not, yes, the rent is too high and you can't afford housing and God knows healthcare is now too high. There's a lot of reasons for that. But his theory of what the problem is and how we fix the problem, I think, is the one that's very convincing. And his theory is this: you have market failures that are creating all of these affordability problems. He didn't use the phrase market failure, but whenever he talks, that's what I hear. So let me explain. Just to give you an example, suppose a big multinational grocery chain finds a low-income community where there are some small mom and pop little grocery stores, some bodegas with some fresh vegetables and fresh foods and so forth, and all the other things you get at a bodega. Multinational grocery chain moves into this low-income neighborhood and forces out all the mom and pop stores and the bodegas, and they go out of business. And now the only food store you have in that neighborhood is this multinational chain. And guess what? Suddenly that chain realizes that it wasn't enough to push out all of their competitors. They still can't make the kind of extractive, exploitive profit that they make in other parts of the country. So what does that chain do? It closes down. It closes down its operations because it's not making enough of a profit. And now what's going on in that community? It's a food desert. That's called a market failure. That is a market failure. And the response to that, the proper response to that, is that when the market fails, it is government's obligation to step in and create a grocery store that is made for the people who live in that community, not for a profit, but to make enough money to be able to keep going and feed that community. Over time, if more small grocery stores pop up in that neighborhood, then maybe the government solution can back off, right? So what I heard Zohran Mamdani saying throughout his campaign is, we're going to freeze the rents. So many apartment rents, we're going to freeze. Why? Because the market is crazy in New York and it is failing the people of New York. And when the market fails, that's when government must step in and do something. I think the same thing is true as with healthcare. The market is clearly failing. right? When you have healthy people who realize that they're healthy enough right now and they can't afford $1,500 a month with a $15,000 deductible on their health insurance, they simply drop out of the market. What does that do? It puts upward pressure on everybody else's premiums. Why? Because now the people in the pool of insured people is they're sicker and older. And so the insurance company is going to be paying out more for them. It sets up a bad spiral, a vicious cycle where it's pushing it down. That's another market failure. When the market fails in that way, then it is government's obligation to step in and finally accept that Medicare for all is really the best way to provide health care for people. I think that unless I hear Democrats and some Republicans say affordability this and affordability that, but unless they understand that their obligation as politicians is to create a really sound government response to the market failures that are creating all of this unaffordability, that's just hot air. They're just saying stuff that they think is cool and kind of, of the times, that they think will get them elected, and it's meaningless. And I really want the Democratic leadership to hear people saying, you need to understand why things are unaffordable, and you need to have the courage to step in and fix it in a real way. So,
Jane Ruby, what say you? What story or stories hit you in 2025, or issues?
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with Terry on sort of the conversation around affordability and people really sort of, seeing in small and large ways that they're sort of fed up with the institutions that be sort of saying, we can't, give the people what they want. And the people saying, well, we're going to demand this of, our governments and hold government accountable. I think we're starting to see that in little blips. And I think that momentum is only going to grow in 2026 and beyond. I'll also sort of do a shout out. This week I was driving through rural Vermont, and on the side of the road in like a town square, I saw a group of moms holding up signs, saying ICE is not welcome here. And, I come from a background of a big city. I live in a big city. The ICE situation is something that I've, seen firsthand, impact the communities that I live in. But it was so incredible to see in a sort of small rural town a group of moms, which I think it's really important to say that this is a group of women standing on the side of the road, sort of making it known that ICE wasn't welcome and standing up for their community in that way. And, there's sort of a lot of really horrifying news stories around sort of ICE and DHS kidnappings that have been happening for months and months and months. But there's also such an grassroots, local community organizing component to combating that and really sort of standing up for what's right and protecting each other. And I think that that's kind of very much a momentum, we need to build on. And when we talk about sort of, correcting a lot of the injustice, like it really starts with taking care of each other, taking care of your family, taking care of your neighbors, taking care of your community in big ways. And the amount of groundswell support of people, making whistle kits, doing know your rights trainings, all of those sorts of things has like that. When we talk about what makes democracy work, it's those sorts of things. And so, I in looking back on moments that gave me hope, that definitely was, one of them.
Well, is it noteworthy? These were white moms, were they not?
In this community it was, but I will, I will speak for, lots of other places where, you're really sort of seeing, there is a luxury tied to, the white mom movement of protecting communities, but, we're really sort of seeing it everywhere. Or local organizations, local groups, really sort of stepping in where our government is failing and, protecting not just people who are here with the proper documentation, but I mean, U.S. citizens are being kidnapped off the streets.
But Jane, this is not to make you defensive. This is to acknowledge, I think, where America has grown. I think of Reverend Jackson closing out his 1988 convention speech in Atlanta saying, America will get better. You remember this, Terry, and better and better and better. And you're seeing people come together past party, past color. I'm not saying that we still don't have issues that we're working through, because we are. We are. But you're having people who are beginning to see each other. What did they say? You know, I think Dr. King said, one day we will see, well, man as man, human as human.
Mm-hmm.
And something in the actions of ICE has hit mothers who have a certain privilege, even if they're not wealthy. They have a certain privilege. I don't care how you get there. I'm just glad that you've arrived. you know, I mean, because there's some people who feel that these people just need to be pushed out. And there are other folks, I mean, because Mayor Brandon Johnson, who is a black man in Chicago, the mayor, he's been getting a lot of grief from his own community, from our community, because some of us have felt and we've been misled. We we believe that he is taking care of immigrants before he's taking care of people who have been here struggling forever and ever and ever. And what many of us fail to understand is that the money that he was given for immigrants, much if not most, Alia, went to Ukrainians. No one's talking about that. Um, that those monies were earmarked for immigrants. He could not have shifted that money over to another community if he tried, Terry. He would have gone to jail. So so I only ask you that, Jane, for really to illuminate for people, where I think that, you're seeing something catch fire across the country. And I think it's exciting to see when you go to Vermont, look, we were campaigning, I think, in Oregon, and you're going from venue to venue, right? We walked into this stadium. It was more than 100,000 people. I said, "Whoa!" And my father his eyes just popped, and he said, "I think something's going on." And I looked at him. I said, "Daddy, I think you're right." But we had seen things. Terry, you saw it. We saw things like this through the whole through those campaigns, and so then you saw it come to fruition with President Obama's campaign. You saw it again with Bernie Sanders. You're seeing it with Mamdani. You're seeing it with AOC. Something is happening. You're seeing people on the right who are pushing for some things that are near and dear to us. And so, I just think it's important for us to acknowledge that, not to push people back, Dr. Amar, and make them feel like they need to explain themselves. Everybody's got a journey. There's a reason that all of us got here, and there's never a straight line. Dr. Amar, what has what has captured your attention in 2025? Or what things? I know everything, because you said all kinds of stories. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
there's a lot that's going on.
What's captured me is that local became national, national became global, and global became local.
Mhm.
And I say that because I think one of the most exciting things to emerge in these intensely distressing times has been the No Kings rally. And the reason that I point out the No Kings rally is, one, I think a few months ago we were all worried about the quality of an opposition and whether or not there could be some coordination. The nation was being divided. This cultural war that always seems to pit whites against blacks, women against men, Muslims against non-Muslims, Jews against non-Jews. It's just all across the place. Heck, we even get to hear constantly that there's a war on Christmas, and I can't tell because all the stores are decorated, the television has it on. You know, it's this thing where we're always being thrown an enemy. But this administration said that the enemy was your neighbor, the person who's teaching you, the guy who sells great food on the street. Um, and so, out of all of that, what was the quality of opposition going to be? And people kept saying, where should we go? Where should we go? Where should we go? Because we've never had to fight on all fronts until we did. And the beautiful thing about that was pro-Palestinian protesters joined alongside people who were fighting for grocery issues and immigration issues here in America. You saw people coming out because of the ways in which women's rights are being stripped, civil rights are being stripped. You see people who are enraged because we now live in a police state, whereas Jane said, and I won't restrict it to Americans. I don't think anyone should ever be taken off of an American street and kidnapped by masked police officers who appear to follow no constitutional law and have told people repeatedly, you don't have any rights. Well, who did that? Who did that? How did I wake up with no rights? Because of all the generations that have fought and died for those rights, I certainly don't think that a single election of a man of dubious qualities changes that. It doesn't change what the law is and how the law should operate. But it brought up the question of our common allegiance to the law, because the law is nothing unless we agree to follow it. And as we begin to watch someone violate it day after day after day, nationally and internationally, people realized that they had commonalities, because the No Kings rallies aren't about one issue. The No Kings rallies are about everyone's issues. And it's finally the 99% being able to get out there and say, this doesn't represent me. This guy doesn't represent me. And no matter what they're arguing for, if you're arguing for trans rights, you might be walking next to an Orthodox Jew and an Orthodox Muslim, and I don't know what orthodoxy is in Christianity, but a Christian maybe walking with you, a Christian pastor, a Christian minister, a priest, heck, the Pope, and so I think that has been one of the most important things to come up. And hopefully, if what we see is that we're all against injustice, we all need to be able and should be able in the richest country in the world to have affordable health care. We need decent housing, and we need affordable groceries and services. Then that will bring us together. That's what got Mamdani in office. People didn't care. All of the divisive cultural mess that was being thrown out in that campaign. Oh my God, if you elect him, you're going to have Sharia law tomorrow. Whatever. Would it bring down the cost of groceries? Like what will we have to do? And people are less interested in hearing the vitriolic garbage that's being spewed when it's not doing anything to help them, and it's definitely doing something to hurt them.
Well, if you look at our kids, everybody here, Attorney Terry O'Neill, Jane Ruby, Dr. Amar, our kids, if you look at the commercials, they're dating everybody. Mm-hmm. They have gone so far. I mean, and really, that's more your generation, Jane. You are already down the road on so many of these issues. And you're like, wait a minute, can we have affordability, please? Mm-hmm. Can we not? Look, I don't want to, all the things that you all want to talk about, I don't want to talk about. My brother, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, and believe it or not, Dr. Amar and Jonathan and I were in the same high school, although I am older than they. And he said, what was so funny about 2008 was when Reverend ran for president, that was like a seismic moment because I guess he's like the Jackie Robinson because he broke the color barrier, right? A generation later, my nieces and nephews, my nieces were pulling for the girl, Hillary, because she's a girl. And the boys were pulling for the boy because he's a guy. That was it. They did a lot of these. That was it. Well, she's a girl. That's what they wanted to see. So as we are looking at that, what do you see, Terry, politically? Just politically, what's on the horizon in 2026? I mean, the midterms.
Right.
What do they portend, given what we've just seen?
Well, what I would like to see is the No King's Day getting bigger and larger and really continuing. And I know that it's going to. I hear people say, "Oh, that No King's Day," and Aaliyah, Dr. Amar, as you point out, it's about everything, and that's a criticism that I've heard. Well, it's about everything, and so you have to focus on just one thing. And I think what those critics don't understand is that these No King's Day rallies and marches and just standing on the side of the road, sometimes holding a series of signs, that it's very local. Those demonstrations are organized locally by a number of local groups.
Mhm.
So you go to a No King's Day event and you find your local group that makes the most sense for you. They're right there, and they're very easy to locate, and you can really just join up with them right there. That's what's golden about it, because I think what is going to pull us out of this white patriarchal capitalist rut that we've been driven into is actually people working together very much at the local level to pull us out, to identify what's really a problem. And so I would love, politically, I would love to see that No King's Day movement grow and grow and grow.
Well, wait a minute. You're an organizer.
The next one.
But you know, but hold on, hold that thought, please. Write it down. You know, that's what we have to do right now. Ooh, why is you have always emphasized, well, not just in terms of what you have spoken, but what you've done, Attorney O'Neill. You've always emphasized grassroots, local organizing, even though you've been president, the national president of the most esteemed women's organization in the United States. And yet, you continue to emphasize local organizing. I mean, even it's granular for you. It's even down to the block.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why is that so important? And why is that so effective to your way of thinking?
I think that what made now so effective was because it was organized around local chapters, and those local chapters have always been autonomous from the national organization. So we were organized a lot like the way a League of Women Voters is organized. It's a slight difference, though. The national organization raises a lot of money and then sprinkles that money out to the grassroots chapters, sort of based on how many members those chapters have at any given time. So there's local organizations and state organizations that are supposed to help the chapters, and that is really what I think made the organization so powerful. Just a really brief story I can tell you. Out on Long Island, there's a small, years ago, this is in the 1990s, there was a small chapter, and they had a meeting with the mayor, and they wanted something from the mayor. I don't know what it was. And the mayor was like, well, blah, blah, legal, blah, can't do it, blah, blah. And the president of this very small chapter in a town in Long Island said, well, sir, I understand that. And I get that you have to do what you have to do. And she looked around at the other women who were in the room with her, and she said, and we're going to have to do what we have to do. So thank you so much. We will see you later. Do you know he changed his tune? He contacted them later and said, I've been thinking, blah, blah, blah. So the point is that she's not beholden to anyone except her own members in that chapter. And grassroots volunteer organizers aren't answerable to the billionaires. A lot of politicians are. And so when we go to the politicians and we want something, for our constituents, we have the luxury, I guess I would say, of not having to make these billionaires happy or those corporations happy. And we just tell the elected officials, look, this is the right thing to do. And here's our analysis. And here's why we think it's the right thing to do. And you can do it or not. And if you don't, we are very politically active, and we will go find some politicians who will, help us move our agenda forward. It's what we're supposed to do. I think that's powerful. It's so much more powerful at the local level even than it is at the national level.
Jane, League of Women Voters. What do you see? Will you be holding debates locally, countywide, state debates, I mean, national debates? To be frank with you, I remember Terry O'Neill and Dr. Amar. It was always, I guess you just took it as an article of faith that the League of Women Voters would be holding the debates, and they felt far more fruitful than they do now. What will you be doing coming into 2026?
Yeah, and first I'll just like to say, I agree completely with Terry in sort of the power of grassroots local organizations who are not beholden to special interests, and that gives you a lot more political power than you think, because, we will build the local grassroots voters who will vote for the policies that we want to see, the elected officials that will hold politicians accountable. And, that's really where we've sort of seen in very successful ways, combating against, the Elon Musks who are, pumping millions into elections, any of these super PACs, when you organize correctly. The league has for over 100 years, we've, been at the forefront of, candidate forums and voter education going into elections and empowering voters to make appropriate choices for their interests going into elections. And, it is very sad that the powers that be at the president's space have decided, decades ago, long before I was born, to, remove the league as a partner in that. But I will say, at the local, county, and state levels, the leagues around the country are still very active in candidates debates. I'll speak for Chicago that we have a partnership with ABC7, and we do a televised debate every election cycle with ABC7. There will be one coming up for the March primary that will be the U.S. Senate race, which for Illinois is huge, having that open Senate seat. So just a little plug, stay tuned for more information about that one. But, it is really, candidate forums are a great way to hold elected officials, both incumbents and new candidates, accountable to the voters that they will be representing. A small little anecdote was, the last Chicago municipal election, there was a district in the city that it was an open seat the first time in a very long time. And this ward included Altgeld Gardens, which has been, a historically, systemically mistreated and misrepresented part of the city. Talk about food deserts, talk about lack of transportation services, talk about, unsafe environmental conditions. It sort of checks all the boxes. And we made it a point to host a forum right there in Altgeld Gardens, in one of the buildings there, and for the candidates, to be there. We didn't do it offsite. This wasn't another part of the ward. It had to be there, and that was incredible priority for us. So the people, the residents, and the candidates could have a dialogue about where things were going to go. And the person who eventually won and is now the alder for that district, still we'll talk to this day about, how important it was to hold forums and candidate forums going into these type of elections in the spaces where the people are going to benefit the most from having those conversations, where the candidates have to be forced to have these difficult conversations with the constituents that they're looking to represent. And I'll also just sort of make a plug, I think, and we've talked about this on the show before, the 84 DNC speech that your father did, 40 years ago, that was a roadmap for a just and equitable society, a way in which sort of voters can hold their elected officials accountable and reclaim the political power that we've all sort of had, and have the kind of idealized world we want. There's that beautiful section in his speech where he talks about when, and he lists out every different demographic, where it's like when Black people win, progressive whites win, when women win, children win, and he goes through the list of how when one group wins, everybody wins. And that's really going into this next election cycle, I have been speaking out a lot about that, because I think when we sort of reframe where political power comes from, when we reframe where accountability comes from, we show people that they really have the political power, and that Elon Musk or Donald Trump or Peter Thiel or any of, or the Apple guy, like that these people don't have the power that we do.
That's
We can all win.
well. No, I mean, Dr. Amar, did that resonate with you?
That really did, because, at the end of the day, we have watched our checks and balances destroyed this year. The Supreme Court has failed the people. Congress has failed the people. The executive branch has most definitely failed the people. And when you look at checks and balances being stripped away, you look at democracy in this country just disappearing, except the founding fathers had a strong belief in the people. And I think that as people, we began to forget that. We began to forget that power that Jane was just speaking to. We began to forget that locally we matter, like Terry was speaking to. What we've seen over the past few decades has been that the alt-right really didn't forget that. And so they ate up a lot of those small seats. They started going for small seats somewhere in the early 80s, I want to say, and then they powered up. And we weren't paying attention to that. We were going for the big prize, the presidency. How many congressmen can we get? How many senators? How many governors? But that local power matters, and it allows us to send signals to the larger parties. The Democrats looked like they were flushed down the toilet of just a few months ago, but they have begun listening, maybe not because they wanted to, but because they had to. People came out on the streets and said, you can't figure out what the issue is. You can't put together the next platform. You don't want to dissect what happened, look into the future and get it right. Neither one of these parties seems to be doing a darn thing for us. Well, then guess what? Democratic Socialists for New York. Is that a hint? Is that a hint? And now you're hearing things like I heard in a panic from some young man who was at the Turning Point event recently, and he appeared on one of the news stations, and he said, well, AOC could become president. And it's like, oh, is that your fear? Because I thought you guys were taking over the world with your little Gestapo. But because we're doing things at the local level that are bubbling up and sending messages to say, we want a paradigm shift. We actually want government of the people, by the people, and for the people. If the people can't buy groceries, why are you in office? If I've got to try to figure out whether I have what used to be a mortgage payment to make as an insurance premium payment, on top of the extraordinarily high deductible that means that I'm going to have to be near death to walk into a hospital, if that is the quality of life that you're offering me, when I can see all over the remainder of the industrialized world, countries in which universal health care already exists and is working perfectly, universal education is working perfectly, but you're constantly telling me that somehow I'm responsible for my own poverty. You're telling that to this next generation that you impoverished as they attempted to get an education because that's what we told them would help them to succeed. Well, the people have something to say back to you. And if you don't listen, they will simply turn very far away from either of these two parties. These two parties are being looked at by this younger generation as old and stale. And unless one of the parties truly listens to the majority of the people, and the majority of the people are not interested in who you're with and who you're loving, what color you are, what languages you speak or don't speak. The majority of the people need to be able to put the same turkey on their table this year that they put last year without being afraid that they're not going to be able to pay rent.
Well,
That's what the majority of the people are.
I think so. But, I think the corporatization of the Democratic Party moved them away from grassroots organizing, because that's how Reverend Jackson won. He said, when I win, you win. So you had people who had never thought of politics before who started running. And I mean, Barbara Lee, former Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who's now the mayor of Oakland, had been a young mom who was on welfare,
Right.
who started getting involved in politics. And I mean, and she became so inspired and turned on that she said, okay, well, why not me? Me too. You had that all over the place until the DLC, as you remember, Terry O'Neill, they launched a coup on the party because they wanted to push the progressives out. And they stopped focusing on the little things. And we paid the price for it. I mean, not just in terms of offices, but the issues. So, I mean, as we move into 2026, I mean, we're now looking at the midterms. It is, please, 11 months and counting. I mean, we're here. We are here because I think we have primaries in March. I don't know where 2025 went, but that's what they say as you get older. Time just whizzes on by. Attorney O'Neill, what should we be doing now? I did not realize that Jasmine Crockett, for example, her race is in March. I mean, it's like it's right here. And that's not to mention the seats that they're going to, well, I don't know what's going to happen with the courts, with the 5 new seats that we could have that would be presented to Californians. I just don't know. But I mean, help me to understand. Just are people? Do you get the sense? Do you think that people will be incited and excited when they see these premiums explode in a couple of weeks?
Oh, absolutely, Santita. I think that's going to be such a major issue, and we've got this on the horizon. In addition to health costs, your health insurance just exploding on you, we have on the horizon this AI bubble. And I keep reading that the huge investments in basically AI plants, they're no less polluting than the worst polluting steel manufacturing and zinc mining and stuff that went on in the 20th century and the 19th century. They're absolutely hideous. What it's doing to neighborhoods in Memphis, you just can't even imagine. But there's all this investment being put into these huge polluting data centers, huge polluting AI plants, and apparently the stock market is beginning to understand that this investment is not actually going to produce a big return on that investment. That AI is really kind of a bubble and it's probably going to burst. The question is how fast or slowly it could burst. So you've got an economic problem on the horizon, and immediately you've got households that are suddenly having to choose, right, between rent and having health care, paying for their healthcare premiums. Now, what I would love to see coming into the 2026 elections, I would love to see organizations really focusing on registering new voters, and re-registering people who have been purged from the rolls. It's not just in the South, but it's very much in the South. For example, in Davidson County, which is Nashville, Tennessee, 80,000 voters were purged from the rolls in 2025 because they didn't vote often enough, which is nonsense. It's not a real reason to be
80,000?
80,000 purged from the rolls. They were sent those little postcards that look like junk mail, and they said, if you don't respond to this postcard to let us know that you still live at this address, we're going to strike you off the voting rolls. So it's extremely important for us to be doing registration every time you have an opportunity. If you're in an organization, you see something going on, make sure that your organization can set up a table and help people get registered. That's one thing. The other thing we need to pay attention to, and why I really emphasize registering voters, is that I believe the Republican Party is going to dramatically ramp up its voter suppression tactics. Yes. Purging voters from rolls is one such tactic. Another tactic is to to change the polling place. So on election day, you don't really know where you are. Another tactic is to make it really hard for older people to vote by mail, to kick them so that you have to constantly prove that you have a doctor's excuse for that you can't go to the polls on election day. Another tactic is to squeeze down the early voting days, to eliminate Sunday voting, to only have Saturday voting until 4 p.m. So a lot of working people make it harder for them to vote early. All of these tactics, we need to be highly aware of those kinds of voter suppression tactics and be able to do something. And again, you can do this at the local level. You call your commissioner, your county commissioner of elections. And at the local level, the county commissioner of elections actually is far more responsive than even at the state level. Certainly at the federal level, it's useless. So I would love to see, making voting just people's ability to exercise their right to vote, just make it easier. And I think we can't fuss so much and complain about people who don't vote. The barriers are so high for so many people. It is kind of not fair to say, well, gosh, I was able to vote. Yeah, because I live in a neighborhood where, my barrier is like 6 inches. All I have to do is step right over that wall. Or, people living in other neighborhoods have 6-foot barriers in front of them. And then we fuss at them for, not wanting to vote. So I think we need to really focus on that. And let me just say one other thing. Huge majorities of Americans want Medicare for all, reasonable gun violence reduction. They want public education. They want affordable housing, and they want law enforcement that doesn't kidnap people off the streets and deprive them of their basic rights. Huge majorities of Americans don't want people's citizenship to be stripped away from them simply because they were naturalized here and they weren't born here. Our causes are not only just, they are extremely popular, and we need to remember that as we are organizing around these issues. We need to know that the people really are behind us, and that we have a lot more power than we think we have when we're dealing with especially local elected officials.
Well, these are the closing remarks. I can't believe the time is going to But Jane, what do you want us to know?
Yeah, I mean, everything Terry just said, I'm in the business of voter registration, voter education, and everyone, if you have the ability, should check what the voter registration laws are where you're living. If you can, have the link saved on a QR code or on your phone and send it out to everyone to change your address. Update your signature is huge, especially for those in Illinois and Cook County and Chicago. Your signature has to match your voter registration forms. But we need to, all hands on deck, whether you're part of an organization or not, we need to make sure everyone is registered to vote. I think especially primaries are really your opportunity to, have a much more specific say in choice of candidates, based on, there's a lot of more options in a primary as to, what voting according to your, beliefs and who you think are the right people for the job. So, for any of the states that have primaries coming up, in March or even going into June, this is your time to really make your voice heard as to the kind of candidates you want to see in the general election in November. And, I'll say, like, and I mean, we've spoken on the show before, and I know you have Daryl Jones from Transformative Justice Coalition on all the time, but I mean, there are such devastating attacks going on at the highest levels of government and the legal system to really strip people of voting rights. And this is something that from, 250 years ago when we declared independence, we've been fighting for a much more equal and inclusive democracy. And the, having these amendments, around women voting, all kinds of people voting in this country, having those be put to test at the highest level of the courts and potentially stripped from us is incredibly devastating. And we need to be paying attention to that. We need to ensure that the ancestors and the generations and the, decades and centuries of people who have voted for our voting rights, that, that work was not in vain, and that, we continue the accountability, we continue defending those rights, and we continue to expand them so more people are included in our democracy. Because who's to say, that if we don't stand up and fight for what's right now, more things are going to be stripped away from us. More people are going to be arrested in this country. Anyone who sort of voices opposition could have their rights taken away, and that's incredibly scary. And it's not insane to think about, and we need to be having those tough conversations. And that's sort of on the sort of scary side, but in the positive side, we're already starting to see people take a stand now. And I think building off of that energy, continuing it, knowing who your people are, knowing who else is going to stand alongside with you and fight against the injustice is incredibly powerful. And to know who your people are, know who your allies are, because I think a lot of people are learning that some of even the closest people that they might know might not always have the same beliefs or understand that we're all in this together. And some people might be okay with seeing rights taken away, and you need to know who the good people are fighting, especially the there's lots of really awesome badass women, including everyone here on this panel who is standing up for what's right. But we need our communities going into 2016, and what we've already seen this year has given me so much hope of what that continued solidarity could look like. I was at a panel at Push last Saturday speaking to youth, and seeing the way young people were responding to what we were talking about and to these hard conversations. It was so hopeful to see how active these young people are in wanting to participate. And we really need to cultivate that when there's such attacks on the education system, when young people are being put in situations where they don't know if they could afford college. Like, we still need to cultivate that civic spirit of we're in this together and things will get better because they have to. And I think, like, I guess my, in a nutshell, like, this idea of radical solidarity is sort of, my key phrase going into 2016 is really sort of maintaining that radical solidarity and, fighting the good fight.
Well, amen to that. Tomorrow, I've got a couple minutes for you. Okay. What say you?
I'm going to start with the idea that isn't it both beautiful and ironic that we are headed to our 250th year as a union. Um, because I think that things like healthcare and the affordability crisis are our Boston Tea Party. Um, we have the momentum and we have the ability for people to kind of open their eyes in a way that they haven't. When the internet first came out, I think that there was a little bit of hope. Wow, people were going to have access to information that they never had access to before, and they could study all sorts of things, they could learn all sorts of things. But algorithms and things that we didn't know were being done to manipulate the way in which we speak to each other and the opinions that we consider, and the information that we receive were out there. And so we didn't become a smarter, more compassionate group of people. We became meaner. And everyone being an expert means that no one is. And so we're now at a point, we're at an inflection point where people are beginning to say, there are many things that have not been working for us, and there are many things that could, but we must begin to get the manipulators off of our backs. We have to get rid of the people who profit from our poverty. We have to get rid of the people who can take millions and millions of dollars from certain groups and ignore life and death situations. We have to get away from whoever is helping to turn the United States into what will be a pariah nation if we're doing things like dropping missiles on small farming boats, and stealing other nations' oil. We have to join together because we don't like being the bully. Nobody likes the bully. And the United States, for what it was worth in terms of our international reputation, the international reputation that we had built, sometimes not entirely deservedly, we have interfered in the growth and progress of other nations for as long as we've been here. But we've also done some wonderful things. US aid was an incredible gift to the world. We were helping to prevent HIV and AIDS infections. We were helping to prevent the global famines. When I was growing up in the 80s, there were always starving children on our television. We only had a handful of stations, and there was always a starving child on one of those stations. US aid helped to do that. Radio Free America helped to get messages out to the rest of the world about the better parts of our values. We may not have even been living up to those values ourselves, but we knew what our aspirations were. And our aspirations said that we wanted to be a better people. And we've taken a massive backslide on that, a massive backslide. But it was there. We have the potential to have the country that we want, but only if we are willing to fight for it. Because clearly, those who are empowered at this moment are not. And so I'm excited by the idea that we will go into our 250th year. But I think it's going to take a few things, including things like we need to be proactive in the legal context instead of reactive, while also anticipating that this administration wants to run everything up to the Supreme Court that votes not based on the law, but based on ideology. But we do need to make sure that, as Terry was saying, some of the problems that are emerging to prevent people from voting are fought against. It should never be illegal to offer someone water or offer someone a seat or offer someone a sandwich when you have stripped away all of the polling places that would have made it possible for people to stand in line less than half a day. when many of the people who are working can't stand in that line half a day, who's left to vote for the interests of that community? People who are out of work, people who are disabled, people who are elderly, people who have health issues. And we have governments that have now established rules and laws that say, we'd rather watch you pass out in a hypoglycemic incident than to see your neighbor hand you a piece of candy or hand you a sandwich. We'd rather keep your 80-year-old grandmother standing on her arthritic legs and knees rather than to allow anyone to offer her a seat. We'll make it illegal to sit down. Those are laws. And if they're in your community, get up and fight now. Don't be reactive, be proactive.
That's it.
We're going to cheat.
Amen. Hey, everybody. I am Santita Jackson. May God bless you. And you got Jane snapping the fingers. I love it.
My sisters.
Come on, everybody. I got the second hour of the Santita Jackson show coming up as we're wrapping up 2025, moving full steam ahead into 2026. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.